Welcome, everyone. This is a first for us, which I think both of us have been wanting to do for 4 years now, 5 years. I'm not sure. It's been a long time.
Seems like at least that, yes.
This is Zanna of Zannaland. I'm here with my husband, Scott.
Hello.
You may know him as Otisney on the internets.
Greetings, everyone.
We have been wanting to do a podcast discussing our love in Disney history and our thoughts on it for a long time, as I said. I want to do it again every time the expo happens, which is why this is now me getting motivated to finally do it after the most recent expo, the
right.
2019 D23 Expo. Just a little bit about Up the Waterfall. Many of you may know that was the Tencennial, right?
The Tencennial, that's right.
Tencennial of Disneyland.
1965.
Where Walt Disney gave ambassador? Or
Yeah,
was that not a thing then?
That's when the ambassador program began, yes,
Okay.
with the first ambassador, Julie Ream.
Julie Ream. Gave her a tour, basically, of what they were planning for the future of Disneyland, which at that time was mainly Pirates of the Caribbean was being worked on.
Pirates of the Caribbean and some other things, the Plaza Inn on Main Street, and several other things, I believe. Can't remember if the Tomorrowland expansion was being presented. I know it was soon thereafter.
So anyway, that just, to me, when I saw that for the first time, and Walt is saying how you got down to this, pirate town going down a waterfall, how are you going to get out? And Julie's goes,
By going up the waterfall?
that's right. Anything can happen at Disneyland. And that, to me, just encapsulated my thoughts on Disneyland, which, excuse me, when I first saw it, I had just visited Disneyland for the first time. So it's a very magical thing, and that is kind of what I wanted to portray here in our podcast, was love of Disney history, Disney magic. So we'll see how this goes and what happens.
That's right.
Let's get right into the expo.
Oh, yes.
You attended this year's expo solo.
I did.
I was not able to make it due to family commitments going on. My daughter's birthday was the 23rd, which was the first day. People were moving into college, school was starting, and it was just a lot going on.
A lot.
D23, why do you always have them when school starts in Florida?
But the thing is, they don't always do that.
That's true.
They've
It wasn't
gone
July.
from September in the first time, I believe, and then they've gone as early as July. 2 years ago, it was actually during Disneyland's birthday, which was in the middle of July.
That's
so
right, yeah.
So they've actually fluctuated in the calendar.
I do prefer
over the
them in
years.
July, just
Yes.
saying. Or maybe, school's already in September. Anyway, what I thought we would do to jump into this discussion, rather than jump right into the 2019 updates, was just go over a little bit of history for those of you who maybe haven't been to an expo before or haven't been in a while. Just kind of go over the history of the D23 Expos, which the first one, of course, was in 2009.
That's right.
Again, you attended that solo because I did not know California was an attainable location to visit
It's
at
very
that point
attainable.
in my life. So I saw people tweeting about it, and I remember thinking, this is so amazing. I can't believe all this stuff that's going on. From people that have been there from the start, they
Yeah.
always say that was the best one.
It was an amazing expo, and what was unique about it was that they only announced D23 as an entity in March of that year. So it's amazing how much they put together in such short amount of time to have that huge of an expo. Literally just 6 months after they even announced D23. And additionally, it was a 4-day expo. All the other expos have been 3 days, and that one was 4, which was the perfect amount of time. Because with all of the presentations that go on in all of the different venues, and then the gigantic show floor on top of all of that, 4 days, 3 days is just never enough. The third day, you're always just kind of scrambling around trying to get see everything that you missed.
What was the show floor like back then? Because I feel like over time, it's definitely become more like corporate partnerships and sponsorships and things like that.
They've
which is
always
still
had
fun,
that, but it seemed as though in the first year they had the corporate sponsorships all up at the front and kind of tucked away in one corner, and all of the other stuff, all of the fun things, not to say that the corporate things aren't fun, they're just not as fun. Any things tucked in the, I guess more expanded in the back. So that's how that was. And in addition, they also had the archives exhibit, which was, I guess, for the first two expos, was on the second floor. The first year they had, it was really just a bunch of random but fun Disney things. They didn't really necessarily have a theme. One of my favorite objects was that they had the little Mickey Mouse that Walt Disney holds in the opening program of the opening of Disneyland when he's bringing the train into the Main Street station. He's got the Mickey Mouse waving. So that actual Mickey Mouse doll was there, which is probably my favorite object overall that I've ever seen in any of the archives exhibits. Yeah.
Interesting.
And just they did have quite a few costumes as well, but then they just also had, it was just a kind of a mishmash, free for all, a bunch of different random things.
I think it was that way for at least the 2011 one, because I was trying to remember them all. It's a lot to keep track of.
It is.
But I think I was looking up photos, and the 2011 archives seemed to be more generic. Like they had a lot of Mickey Mouse Club things. They had Zorro, Tron costumes and things like that. But that's what I love, is when it's a good mix of all that there is within the Walt Disney Company, not just TV shows, not just live action films, not just animation things, but a combination of everything, because that's why we love it.
Yeah, this year's definitely had a theme with costumes, and I don't know if we'll get into that later.
We'll get into that, I think, coming up, because, I want to go over all the things for this year. But, I mean, do you have anything else to say about the 2009 one?
Well, because it was their first expo, it was the first time that they had ever done anything like that, and so they did encounter quite a few problems with lines. Probably not as bad as they did in the next expo, because they had a lot more people attending because of what they had all heard from the first expo. Mm-hmm. But they didn't have like backup venues, or they didn't probably plan enough for the space. And even all of the largest presentations were done in the arena, which I guess now seats fewer people than in the D23 hall, right, which is now much bigger. But
you saw a lot of fun people then too, like Johnny Depp was there. He was
in the studio's presentation, which they actually combined the animation and live action, which I guess they did this time, but they have been split in previous expos. It was just a giant cavalcade of stars, including they brought the Muppets out on a steamboat singing the Rainbow Connection, which brought a tear to many people's eyes.
I've never seen. I have to look that up.
Yeah, that was amazing. They had a then superstar Miley Cyrus sing The Climb.
Hey, she's still a superstar.
She is still a superstar, just kind of shifted a little bit. They had, that's actually the first time that they brought out Marvel's, I guess they had just announced the Marvel acquisition literally the month before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I guess so, because 2011 was the first year they had a Marvel presentation.
Right. But then, yes, the thing that made everybody go absolutely bonkers was completely unannounced and unexpected. Johnny Depp came out in full Captain Jack Sparrow regalia, and he just tore the place down, just doing his Captain Jack, which he apparently just absolutely loves portraying that character. So, but everybody just went completely bonkers.
Wow.
Lost their minds when that happened. That was...
Well...
I guess that was when they announced the third Pirates movie for that one.
Wow, that seems so long ago.
I know.
I do regret not being there, of course, for 2009. But now I've got a nice round. Missed all the ones with nines in them. I've missed. Well, let's move on to 2011, which was the first one I attended.
Yay.
It was also my first time visiting California and my first time visiting Disneyland.
Yes.
So I was a bit of a wide-eyed, I don't know. I was like completely overwhelmed by everything. And I think that's what made me love going to the expo so much, because it's right next to Disneyland. And it's not like just you're going to a convention and then you go home. You're going to a convention and then the minute you get out, you go to Disneyland.
That's right.
And you stay there until it closes, which,
Until
I'm
they
not
kick you out.
too up to doing that anymore. My feet kind
That's
of
what we did
get the
every
best
day,
of me.
though.
But yeah, we definitely did that. And it was just completely magical. I've written blog posts about Disneyland, and I didn't really go over, I don't think, my specific thoughts on after the expo, but I definitely loved it, mainly because they had, at that time, that was the year of the Carousel of Projects, which every year they do have an Imagineering section.
It's Imagineering / Parks and Resorts.
Oh, okay. It's the combo.
Right. It's essentially they're portraying what or showcasing what they are bringing out into all of the parks worldwide from the Imagineers.
And some years, are better than others.
That is true.
Which we'll get into in future ones.
That one was a really good one.
But Carousel of Projects was really fun because it actually had a pre-show area. Like you wait in line to get into it. And then it had a fun little pre-show area that made you feel like you were back in, the time when Carousel of Progress was first a thing.
They didn't do that in every expo. I think it's probably now been either 3 and 3 where they've done it and not, or 4 and 2, I'm not sure. But it would be where you would enter a queue and go into a giant pre-show where they would probably bring in maybe 100 to 200 people at a time and then give them a nice presentation and then release them out into their exhibit floor. Whereas the other times, they wouldn't have that pre-show, and basically they would just have whatever they are exhibiting, and you can walk right in and see whatever they're showcasing or not.
And that year, I think, was when they had Cars Land was the big coming next thing.
Yes, I remember they had a thing where a room where you could enter and basically see how Cars Land was going to be from a 360 perspective, a 360 degree perspective. Which
was that when they had the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train car too? Was that year?
Probably.
Having been to all years, 6 I should have. I know they all run together. I think that was that
tough.
year because that was when I met Matt that year too.
Probably.
Anyway, let's see, what else did they have? Oh, that was also when Buena Vista Street was going to be built. So they had, I think, models of how that was going to look in the new storefronts and things like that, which was very exciting.
Yes.
Additionally, let's see, what else? That's all I really have for that year at the expo. But, I mean, I was completely overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, having been to Disneyland, this would have been your very first time. It would have been very overwhelming.
Yeah, and
seeing that.
I do remember that was when I learned that you can't see everything.
Nope.
You have to, and it's gotten, more and more difficult with each expo to see. They just really pack in things and they're all at the same time, some of them. And you have to decide, do I want to see the main presentation or do I want to see some of these smaller things that are put on, presentations put on by Imagineers or animators or Disney historians. Yes. And those are really the reason to go because that's the content that you can't really get anywhere else.
And that's very true because those are that's the great thing about those projects. They had they're typically in smaller venues where they're the focus of the presentation is more narrow, but definitely by those that are very passionate about what they're speaking. And there's usually those are really top-notch ones, and not to say that the larger presentations aren't. They just take a bigger block of your time in both waiting for them beforehand, getting seated, getting everyone ready, and then they do typically run long, like the big studios presentation and the Parks and Resorts presentations, which are great. Always fun to see that content, but yeah, the smaller ones are very nice too.
Yeah, and that's where you get to hear those fun stories from the people that, some of them even worked with Walt Disney himself. Right. They're still out there, and that's also why we love Destination D so much, because it's more that kind of content.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to talk about, is the difference between the Destination Ds and the Expos. Destination D is they present everything in one room it's usually 2 very full, long days, but you see everything. You don't miss a thing because it's only in one venue, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But here at the expo, when they, I believe the first year they had 3 venues, 3 of the main larger venues. One was on, I guess 2 were on the second floor and 1 was on the first floor, and plus the show floor itself. And they have amazing presentations, but they're always against each other, and they don't necessarily try to counter program, meaning putting a lot of times it's very interesting things that are happening in 2 different venues literally at the same time, and you basically have to plan and choose.
You have to pick and choose, and that's why YouTube is great, because you can watch things later if they let you record things. Sometimes
That's right.
Some of them you can't record in or take photos because they're showing, archived animation things and what they're working on and stuff like that.
So whereas we've absolutely seen some phenomenal presentations, we've equally missed just as many great presentations.
So let's jump ahead to the next 2013 Expo.
Yes.
I think this was really, for me, I know everyone says that the first one was the best one, but this was my favorite Expo of any Expo, any Disney thing I've done. This had, I think they were just kind of realizing the power that they had, and then that kind of went away because they didn't do this again. But there was, this was when Tomorrowland, the movie, which, didn't have great reviews, great box office numbers, but we didn't know that in 2013. So going into it, and we didn't even know that this is what it was about, but there was a thing that started.
It was teased in the movie presentation that was given by the directors.
And they had that
Brad
box.
Bird
there was the box that they found.
I believe Damon Lindelof of Lost fame.
Yes.
And they were kind of teasing about this. And actually, I remember now, they actually had that exhibit
in the middle of the floor.
In the middle of the floor. They had it under a curtain for the whole first day. And you couldn't even, basically, like, what's the thing behind the curtain? And then they teased it in the movie presentation about what that was in this lost box.
Yeah, and they really made it seem like this really happened, and we really found this box, and it really connects things to another. There's like the secret society, but leading up to the expo,
that's right.
there had been.
Before the
I don't know where it. I guess it just surfaced on Twitter or something like that. But it was called The Optimist, and it was supposedly this girl was just starting a blog, and she had found some things of her grandfathers who had worked with Walt Disney, and all these clues, and she was finding things. But it turned out that every blog post and every clue that she found was actually like a huge, nationwide geocaching kind of.
That's right. I remember a lot of the folks that especially
hunt.
lived in Southern California, it was basically they would find clues from these blog posts, and I think there were even some YouTube presentations. I can't really remember that. But basically they would drive around Los Angeles area to find, I remember there was one where you had to go to one restaurant and get a can of chili. And you open it up and there was a clue inside. Taking them, and I remember a couple of times they actually ended up at Disneyland and they had to ride the rocket or the Astro Orbiter to see another clue.
Yeah, that's right. And there was the Griffith Park carousel. There was a clue there. And luckily, people that were doing this were tweeting about it, and that was when Periscope was a big thing. So people were like periscoping, finding clues. There was one that took them to Club 33. This was before they had redone it. And they got to go upstairs, and I think there was something to do with the phone booth.
Oh, yeah.
They got a call from someone that told them the next clue. So it was really like amazing to watch, even not being able to participate over
very
here.
Interconnected scavenger hunt.
I loved it. And then the scavenger hunt continued at Expo, and there was a booth there where there was this guy that was making maps, and he was the one that had designed the maps that you were supposed to go to find these clues that people had been tracking down. And then if you went to him, he would give you another clue, and they had like the Tower of the Four Winds or something there with the
Oh, that's right. There were
like the
several
sundial
different
thing or
things,
something.
like things in the Parks and Resorts exhibit.
Yeah, and you had to go around the expo and find these answers. And then one of the clues, you had to go across the street to Disneyland.
Which is nuts because given the fact that the expo is only 3 days, I've never left the expo ever.
Yeah. We'd really waited till the last minute to do it because we were like, oh, we don't want to leave. There's so much happening.
It was so much fun. We ended up going to the parks, and there were, I think, like actors portraying certain people.
I forgot about that. Yes, outside of Sleeping Beauty Castle, right by the Snow White wishing well. There was people there, and I mean, they kind of had to be obvious because they wanted people to figure things out and get the clues. Yeah. But it was just like, I think this is a clue kind of thing, and it was just funny. But we're like, okay, great. And then we ended up on the Lily Bell.
Yeah, you had to be on the Lily Bell in between, was it the Tomorrowland Station and New Orleans Square?
And once you were in there, there was some like announcement that happened on the speaker,
yes,
and then we were given cards somewhere, and we had to unscramble them to get the message, which I have no memory of what the message was.
I still have those cards, of course.
Okay, well, and then I guess that took us back to the expo, and then it took
us to the Main Street Cinema.
Oh my gosh, that's right, I forgot about the cinema. Okay, so that took us to the cinema. We had to find a person that had like a pin on or something. That's didn't
right.
We?
Very particular, the Tomorrowland pin, which you've probably seen.
Yes, and then that took us to the Main Street Cinema. When we all got in there, a group of people, suddenly the Mickey original cartoon shorts that were playing in black and white changed, and it was all of these crazy scenes of like space travel and like futurist stuff.
Yeah, essentially having us join the Optimist Society, whatever it was called.
Plus Ultra, wasn't that it?
That's right. Yeah.
It had that little symbol.
And then a hidden screen, completely different than the 6 screens that are in there, came up and showed us another video, and then it presented us with our Tomorrowland pins,
which rose up like the main screen when you walk into the theater. That's where it was. The pins rose up out of nowhere and were all displayed. I mean, it was the coolest thing I've ever been a part of.
Yeah.
It was just like so fun and satisfying to do. And I mean, I think that's why like you and I kind of like Tomorrowland the movie more than most people, because we had that connection to it. Yeah. And we're like, it's fine. We love it.
I actually do.
It's not that bad. I do wish there was more Tomorrowland scenes in it and things like that, but whatever. Anyway, that was a super cool part of the 2013 Expo.
I was there for it.
Additionally, and also I checked recently, the Optimist site is like no more. I know.
Oh well.
That was the year too that they did the Adventureland Trading Company.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, this was also the year, before we get into that, because this was part of it, I think, in the Imagineering section. Mm-hmm. They had some of the original models of like the Land Pavilion and Journey into Imagination, and
which were amazing.
I mean, those were so cool. I'll see if I can find my photos from that and we can throw them in here. And the Western River Expedition model, which was like also crazy for people that are super into Disney history and things like that. So that was my favorite because of that too. Like I love seeing those old models and that kind of stuff that, regular Joes don't get to just walk in and experience on a daily basis. They don't work in, Imagineering or... Anyway, that was super cool. But then also going on at that same time was the Adventureland Trading Company, which we kind of heard about because there's so much going on. We kind of found out about that a little bit late also. But that was an additional scavenger hunt kind of situation within the expo. And you had to like take photos you had to look for certain things like Rosita, I think, was there or something. There was like a bird from the Tiki Room there, and you had to take a photo and you had to do all these things. And then when you did the different scavenger hunts, the different quests, you got a little juju item, which was like made out of like resin, and it had like a little leather cord on it. And they were really cool. I have to find those somewhere too. Those are in your library somewhere. And then that later went on to be an actual attraction at Disneyland that following year in 2014, and they had the same kind of little prizes, only they were colorized. Ours, I think, were just like natural tones. They weren't really colored. So yeah, that was really cool, and I love that kind of stuff. Also,
Oh yeah.
I wish the parks would do more of those sort of things. I know they still have the pirate one in Adventureland, which
They do.
is cool on its own, and we've got the Phineas and Ferb thing still.
Still the Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom.
Sorcerers. But I like the things where you get something at the end,
Yes.
like a quest, and you like accomplish something and get a cool thing. Anyway, that was also the year that they had the Waffleinator outside, which was like a big, that was when they realized, oh, we can do stuff outside too.
Yeah.
That was kind of crazy, from Phineas and Ferb. That was, I think, the second year they had done Stage Pass.
Ooh.
In the first year they had done the Store Pass. Is that what it's called? Store Pass?
It is called Store Pass.
So they were figuring things out and realizing that, like, hey, there's a lot of people here and we need to figure out a better way to...
a way for people to essentially kind of get a fast pass to a presentation of their choice. Basically, be able to hold one of them at a time and just to be able to get a guaranteed seat, because there were too many times when they would have giant lines of people and not sure exactly how many seats they had, and sometimes then they would let the people in and they would have to cut off the line, and some people who were lined up hours before to a presentation would not get in.
Yeah.
And I believe that even happened to you once.
That did happen to me with the
Van
first
Dyke
one
and the
I went to in 2011, Dick Van Dyke. But then he appeared later at another expo, or maybe that was Destination D. I can't remember.
It's hard to remember.
Anyway, I saw him, so it's all good. So yeah, that was my favorite expo
That was a good one.
ever. And I do miss the interactive things that they do. I mean, I'm sure they've figured that there's too many people and they can't do stuff like that.
Yeah.
I wish that they could. I wish that they would do smaller things maybe throughout between the years, or make Destination D have a fun component like that. I don't know. Just throwing out ideas, Disney. Let's quickly go through 2015 and 2017, because there's not as much fun stuff with them. I mean, they are fun, but you know, they started to, I think, realize like, oh, this is, now we can expose people to all of our corporate synergy models. We can gear this toward families, which honestly, I've seen people bring kids there. I have a 10-year-old now who was, you know, of course, younger at the earlier expos. I would not have wanted to bring him. Sorry, Gio. There's so much going on. There's so many lines to wait in. Like, it wouldn't be enjoyable to me to have.
I have no idea
to worry
how
about him. People
with children could do that. God bless you.
It's different if you have like a baby and then you can just like do what you want and have him or her there with you. But anyway, so I guess that was the first year for Store Pass, was 2015.
Okay.
That was also the first year that people were invited to dress up. I don't know if they were doing, I'll have to look up if they were doing the contest yet, but that was when they were like, hey, everyone dress up if you want to, because like cosplay
people
was
definitely
have
have been dressing up since the
they had
first
been,
one.
but they were just like inviting people to do it.
Okay.
That was also the year that pretty much the entire Imagineering Parks and Resorts presentation on the show floor was Shanghai.
Yeah.
There was that
like
smaller
98%.
Avatar land thing, which was fun also, because I think Avatar was still like, what's it gonna be? So there was like weird mystery clues with like people's desks and things. That might have been the year before.
I think that was
year. And then that year, 2015, was when they had the Na'vi head was in there that you could.
I do remember the one that
and
where it was Shanghai. That was pretty much the bulk of the parks and resorts.
And now, of course, all of that same stuff for the most part is in the China Pavilion in Epcot. So
that's right.
You can pretend you're at Expo when you go through and see all of those things.
In the museum there.
So, I mean, do you have anything else to say about 2015?
It's very tough because, as I said, they do all run into each other.
That was the year that Star Wars Land was announced, too, I believe.
Oh, that's right.
So that was a big, exciting moment for people. And then we were like, wait, what? It's going to be in both parks, West Coast and East Coast? It's kind of crazy. All right, we'll jump ahead to 2017. That was, I think, the first year that the mouse parade was a thing, and then of course it was there again this year.
It was.
So they really, and people really do go all out for their costumes.
I did not attend that, but I did see it later on video.
I mean, I don't know how.
Crazy.
If people do that, they kind of have to commit to, this is the only thing I'm doing at Expo.
Pretty
It's
much.
like walking around in this outfit and doing this contest, because it's like crazy, the people that dress up. But it's fun to see. There's lots of like mashups and crossovers where, you know, girls are doing traditional boy characters or mixing up two different movies, or a Disney thing and a non-Disney thing. So it's always fun to see the creativity and things like that. I would recommend looking it up on YouTube if you want to see some of the past winners. That was the year that they had the Scrooge McDuck money bin photo opportunity, which always had too long of a line. I did not get. We walked by it a few times, but we did not wait in line to jump into it. It was a fun thing.
It was a fun thing where you could jump into the giant pile of gold coins and swim around.
So
just like Scrooge McDuck.
Exactly. So there is always, you know, a fun something happening on either on the show floor or whatever. What else? That's when we had the Galaxy's Edge model as well, which was gigantic.
It was very big, but that was basically our first time ever seeing it in 3D form.
Yeah.
Being able to walk right up to the model and kind of examine it and see what was going to come.
And try to figure out, like, where is this entrance going to be?
Nothing was pointed out. Nothing was indicated, like, this is going to be this or that's going to be that. This is where the attractions are. No, they just had the model there. You could basically guess. And but also just seeing all the details in that model and see how immersive, how huge and gigantic it was. And, where are the entrances going to be within the parks? That was never explained then. So we now know.
We now know. We've been there. That was also the year that the Archives exhibit was the Pirates of the Caribbean themed one, which that was fun because they really themed the space that it was in. There was like fog machines and they had models of like pretty big models of the various ships.
Yeah, and certainly by this point it had gone from the second floor back down onto the main show floor.
And
keep it centrally located. They
had lots of fun things in there, including the animatronic dog with the keys in his mouth, which you could take a selfie with, which I have. So yeah, that was fun. And that was Oswald was like the mascot that year. So there was lots of Oswald backdrops that you could take photos of. It was a fun time. And then that brings us to present day, and I have nothing to say because I wasn't there.
Well, I was there. I went for us.
So what do you think, comparing it to all the past expos? What are your thoughts?
I would say it definitely had a lot more people, I believe. I did hear that they sold out each of the days. Several of my friends did not have passes for Saturday because that day sold out first, and when they got tickets, they were unable to get Saturday tickets. So what
was happening on Saturday?
That is when they did the studios presentation.
Oh, the
primarily.
Studios, okay. Because the parks and resorts was Sunday.
Yeah, the Saturday is always the busiest day. Probably also just because it's right in the middle of the weekend. No, so in addition to just being tons of people, they had additional venues. They had the hall, D23, the stage 28, the archive stage, and the expo arena. And in addition to that, they had a lot of minor miniature stages here and there on the show floor, including center stage, where they had all kinds of varying things from Radio Disney to some of the bigger people, just in a less of a formal setting. And on top of that, they had the Disney Plus, and that was, I would say, the primary push, especially from the Disney corporate side, is they're pushing the Disney Plus, and that is a pretty big thing. And so, literally in the center of the show floor, it just looked like it was the middle thing, kind of the hub of the entire show floor was the gigantic Disney Plus booth, where people could sign up for the pretty awesome deal that they were giving,
which you can still get. if you're a D23 member, I believe.
It's a different deal.
Oh, it is?
It is a slightly not as good deal, but it's still a pretty good deal.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it was just for 1 week only, was that one. But Disney Plus does seem to be amazing.
They really didn't have to. I mean, they went kind of overboard with their upselling, like there's a lot to it.
If they're asking people to give them money, they basically have to promise that they're going to give us something great. And they do have a lot of amazing content, and there's going to be a lot of original material, both movies and series, as well as all of the most of the Pixar films, Marvel films, and a lot of the animated Disney classics, as well as old content, TV shows. And it's just going to be a lot of stuff on this one platform. And I guess the deal that they were offering was you could get it for 3 years for the price of 2, which, if you were to do the math, it comes out to less than $4 a month over that 3-year period. But it's pretty amazing. But anyway, as I was saying, that was the central location. And in addition to that, they had a stage there where they would often bring out stars. Like, for example, they were doing a show, what's it called? The World According to Jeff Goldblum, for example.
Yes.
And so he came out on stage and talked about that and on all kinds of things. And
Who doesn't love Jeff Goldblum?
Everyone loves Jeff Goldblum. And so that was cool to see. They had all kinds of presentations, and they literally had each day a list of what was going to be presented there on that stage, and it was all day, and it was like maybe 15 to 30 minutes, little blocks, but it was basically constant. There was always something going on there. And then in between that, there would be people on stage showing you how this new Disney Plus thing was going to work. So that was fun. And additionally, that they had the Parks and Resorts booth, which was amazing. And the big primary thing there was all of the changes at our favorite park, Epcot, Epcot Center.
I was excited to see the photos that were there with the attractions posters and.
Yes, so they had, I think it was 40 attractions posters, not necessarily the things that are all there now, but things that were there in the past, things that are coming in the future. In fact, even 2 of them were draped and said, "We will reveal these on Sundays after the park's presentation." So that kind of intrigued people and gave them a reason to come back, as well as a fun model that they had it was in the back of that pavilion. Was a kind of a map, not really a map of Epcot, but a model of Epcot, but not in its actual form, just kind of a free-flowing thing with all of the pavilions around. And then lights would shoot at it from above, which would tell you what was being portrayed on the giant screen in the back, because they were showing a giant movie, essentially, of all of the coming things to Epcot.
And there's a lot.
And there is a lot, and we will get into that. But they also introduced the new
Star Wars Hotel?
I was going to say the logos for all of the different pavilions there. But they, separately from the Epcot thing, they did produce the new logo. I'm sorry. The hotel for Star Wars. Was it Star Wars?
I mean...
Or is it space?
No, it's Star Wars, isn't it?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was confusing that with the restaurant at
Space
Epcot,
220.
which is Space 220. But yes, they showcased the model of the
Halcyon.
The Halcyon, the ship that you will be staying on when you stay at this hotel, which is
the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser.
A 3-day, 2-night experience.
Correct.
Interesting.
And I did some updates on that and got a lot of questions about, I hope you can visit the parks while you're there and, things like that. But you really need to look at this as like you're going on a cruise.
Yeah.
And you can't go to Magic Kingdom while you're on the cruise.
Yes.
You're not moving physically, but you are going to space.
Physically located at Disney World. It is just like a cruise ship.
Yes, and it's only 2 nights, so like they're telling you a story when you're there. You're loading.
You will be completely immersed
with people that are there with you for your 2 nights. You're all going to do this together, and take part in the different activities. And what you can do is you can visit Galaxy's Edge while you're staying there. And they have little transport cruisers that are
interesting,
really buses. No, they've come out and said
I
what
actually did not see any of that.
But yeah, it's gonna, and then they'll take you right in, so it's gonna look like you're going through space to get there. So,
but then they also had attraction ride vehicles for the new Tron coaster at the Magic Kingdom, which does exist at in Shanghai, but they also had a model of the new Hong Kong castle, as well as the land the expansion in Tokyo Disneyland. And then on top of that, they had a whole other section of the Avengers campus, which they are bringing to California Adventure, as well as Hong Kong Disneyland and Disney Studios Park.
Yes.
Disneyland Paris Studios Park. So. Yeah.
So it's strange to me over the past few years how they've tried to make the other overseas parks more visitable, more attainable to the average guest, because it's all like everything's connected and we're telling you all the improvements we're doing to these places too, and you should really try to go there, which maybe someday. But yeah, and then I was just gonna say all the Epcot changes I feel like we should maybe go into during our Epcot episode, which is coming up. But basically, I mean, I'm sure everyone's heard it by now. This is not a news podcast. We're just kind of sharing our thoughts on things.
On things that happened at the expo.
But we can just quickly go over the fact that, there are some great changes coming to Epcot. And by great, I mean huge.
Yes. A lot of changes.
Some of them will be good. Some of them will, make us oldsters that are original Epcot Center fans shed a tear or two.
Yep.
But change is inevitable.
And it has already begun.
It has already begun. We were there for Food and Wine, and, the whole middle section with that little planter thing in the middle is under construction, walled up. There's already been changes over by the Communicore that is going to be turned into whatever that's going to be turned into. Gardens.
Of some sort.
So yeah, it's happening before our eyes. They are also working on the preview center, which I am excited to see, which is in the former Odyssey restaurant now, the Odyssey Pavilion. Disney Imagineering presents the Epcot preview center at Odyssey Pavilion or something. It's the longest title.
Long title.
But it should be fun. I mean, if there's anything Disney can do well, it's make a model. So I'm excited to see that. And there'll be, video projections on what's coming soon and things like that. So that'll be exciting. Other big news was the Mary Poppins attraction, which we have no real concrete concepts on, other than it will be Mary Poppins Returns themed.
And of course, we'll be in the United Kingdom Pavilion.
It will be in the United Kingdom Pavilion, and you will be entering 17 Cherry Tree Lane. Where you will go from there, what you will do, we do not know, but
I would recommend watching the movies for that. Maybe.
And then a new China movie and a new Canada movie. They also re-announced that, the Beauty and the Beast sing-along is going to happen. I really don't like them messing with my Impression de France.
The Remy and Ratatouille ride as well.
Yes,
So
which
a lot of changes.
Yeah, which we're excited for I'm excited for them.
Oh, plus Guardians of the Galaxy, of course.
Guardians of the Galaxy, yes. Which we now know has a name, Cosmic Rewind.
Yes.
And will have a reverse launch into space, which I am absolutely terrified for.
I'm excited, so
I mean, I have only ridden Expedition Everest once, and I was in bed for 2 days after because
God bless you.
I got an extreme case of vertigo or something. But I will do it once to see what happens because I have to experience it. I'll take some Dramamine or something. I don't know, but we'll make it happen. So yeah, I mean, that's basically what happened at this year's expo. The usual Mickey's of Glendale was there. There's always that's the shop that Imagineers get to go to.
Yes. For the first 2 days, I actually physically saw the giant wave of guests that were released at 9 a.m. make a beeline for that But it was mainly for pins.
They did have a pin set for.
It was not a happy place that first morning.
I know. eBay sellers kind of go crazy, I guess.
Yes, and I think quickly within 30 minutes it turned into a 9-hour line.
Wow.
And I'm not even
Why
kidding.
would anyone wait 9? This is the downside. I mean, there's ups and downs to every expo, and as I said leading up to it when I was writing about it on the blog and stuff, my feet hurt just thinking about it. It is a lot of walking. There's a lot constantly going on, a lot of waiting for things to happen. But there's really, I mean, I don't know how else they could make it work.
That's just how giant expos work.
Yeah.
It's how Comic-Con works. It's how D23 Expo works.
Yeah, but there is a lot of good that comes out of it, and whether it was
a lot of fun,
interesting
ultimately.
for me to be watching from home, and I did get to go to AMC theaters here in Disney Springs to see the Parks and Resorts, or whatever, it's not that anymore, Parks Experiences and Products presentation, which was fun to be a part of. We couldn't take any photos in there, so you were furiously sending me photos from Anaheim as I was tweeting them out.
So you had a leg up.
Well,
that time.
I do like live tweeting. It's fun to do that and share the things that are happening.
Tough to get,
Yes,
there was not
Wi-Fi was not our friend. But it was still fun. Those kind of news things, which can be scary, are still fun. It's fun to be a part of them, even if you're just watching. I'm sure
also just because they're literally rattling off so many different announcements, one after the other after the other.
Yeah,
it's unrelentless.
And that's why, I mean, it took me a few days to be able to write about all of the Epcot changes, which I did.
You should check out that post.
Yeah, it's the magic of possibility on Zanna and. But you just have to, even if you read them happening, you're like, okay, this is happening. You really have to absorb it and be like, wait, what does this mean? Really, what's going to happen?
They're not revealing everything.
Yeah,
so
and you just kind of you make
assumptions,
assumptions, and they could be wrong, and things could change. I mean, Hyperion Wharf is a perfect example of that. There's many others that have been announced and never, come to fruition. But that's why we keep being Disney fans, for all of the ever-changing, ever-updating news and announcements and changes and fun stuff.
That's right.
So I think that's going to wrap it up for us. Do you have any other thoughts or recommendations for people wanting to visit the next expo? Basically,
plan. That's probably the best thing that you can do, is just plan. When they do release a lot of the schedule, they kind of, over time, they release all of the presentations, but going into it, you should have all of that. And so basically you need to pick your 1, 2, or 3 things that you absolutely must see and get those.
Yeah.
They did have a system this year that they tried out for the first time ever, where online you could register your credential and essentially pick, I guess it was for each day, you could pick 2 presentations as long as they were in a different venue, and essentially get a fast pass, but several days before. And they did that. They were not. I know there was a lot of frustration with that, because the way that they did it, you kind of had to go through a bunch of different menus and things to find the ones that you were looking for, and then you could do all of that and find out, oh, nope, that one's already filled up.
So a typical Disney registration process.
Yes. So it was. But I mean, it's a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
Doing it all at the same time, so it was tough. But it was just a way to maybe pick 1 or 2 or 3 of your absolutely must-dos and essentially guarantee a seat for those.
Yeah, that was
which helped. But basically, just try to plan and go into it knowing that you will not see everything that you want to see.
Right.
But there's so much amazing content. There's so many of the great smaller presentations. Those are great backups. You will not be disappointed with any of those.
Yeah.
And then if you can't get into any of those, there's always the show floor, which is so amazingly gigantic. There's so much that you can wander around and see. I mean, in addition to all of that, they had the where the fans are able to display their own wares. I can't remember the name of that area. Do you remember the name of that section?
The Emporium.
The Emporium, where people, you've usually seen these at varying Disney conventions, where it's usually the same set of characters that have their booths. Yeah. But there's a lot of great content
Either
there.
Major, Disney blog / media people, travel agencies, pin sellers,
booksellers, posters, and sometimes there's actually old Imagineers there that are selling like their book, and so it's a great place to meet them. So that's a fun place to go, and so there's really just so many different places to go along the show floor. So there's 3 full days of unending content for you. So just know that. And
my tip would be, of course, to get the Expo app.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if anyone can see this
I can.
Here. Which they really updated this year. And it's very
really
sleek and nice. And I mean, I kept checking it even though I wasn't there. But if you're there, you can select your favorites and then set up notifications. And it can tell you like, hey, this is happening in 15 minutes.
That came in very handy.
And things like that.
You do lose time while you're there, and it's easy to lose track of time. And me personally, I don't even eat during the conventions because that just takes time away from all the content.
Well, let's not recommend that. People are going to be fainting.
Just saying, I bring snacks, so bring snacks.
Yeah, that's true. And you will do a lot of waiting, and it will be mostly worth it, I think. It's
ultimately
the bottom line.
It is worth it. It's just a lot of fun, very unique things.
But really, I mean, if you are going there for the major announcements, I would check the schedule before you go in and see if some of those smaller presentations appeal to you, because you're going to find out the news online eventually anyway, or almost immediately at this point.
Yes.
But what you're going to want to do is see these things that you can't see everywhere else, and there's not going to be
That's a great point, because let me give you an example. On Saturday that's when they had the giant studios presentation where they basically showcased every movie, every animated film, every Pixar, every Lucasfilm, every Marvel film that was going to be coming out in the next few years. And yes, they trotted out tons of stars, celebrities from those projects, which is tons of fun to see. But it's also it's scheduled as a 2-hour block, but it usually runs 2.5. They always start late. It always ends late. It's just a huge amount of time, plus the time that you have to wait just to even get in the queue for that. But at the same time, they actually had, for example, in one of those smaller venues, Mark Davis, in his own words, Imagineering the Disney Theme Parks, where Pete Docter and the other author were presenting their book that they had just come out on Mark Davis, which was, no kidding, probably the greatest Disney book I have ever seen. And it weighs in at 11 pounds. It's 2 volumes.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm a Disney books guy. As
we'll definitely be discussing
later,
future books.
And so they were basically introducing this book and Mark Davis and all that. And so if you had just skipped the studio's presentation, all of the news that you would have received later and gone to something like that, no doubt you would have been completely entertained and blown away by just something as simple as that. So that's a perfect example.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what, as uber Disney fans or Disney history fans, I think that's what Expo brings, and that's what you are able to focus on if you want. And that's why we keep going back, or at least you do.
Well,
I'll be there next time, maybe. We'll see. Get your dates into my calendar correctly.
Who knows when it'll be announced.
I know. All right, well, that about wraps it up, guys. This was probably a long one. I don't know if we'll, keep them this long in the future. Well, I didn't intend to. We just kind of rambled on, as, this is what happens when you get talking about Disney.
And about things you love.
Exactly. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, if you're watching us. And we'll see you next time.
That's right.
As we go up the waterfall.
Up the waterfall.
That is absolutely fantastic.
Well, it's only part of it. We got a big climatic scene.
But how could you top it?
Well, we set the place on fire, and we have our audience trapped down in this flaming city.
How can they get out then?
Well, now you got into this mess by going down a waterfall. Now, how would you suppose we get them out of there?
By going up the waterfall?
That's right. Anything's possible in Disneyland.